I was raised by my grandfather to a degree, and he was, I would consider, a master gardener. Every year we had in his garden, he lived in a place called Oceana, which is in central California, right by the ocean. And he had probably, I want to say, a couple of acres, but a good portion of it were roses. And we got to learn all the different names and we got to learn about the plants and so forth. And he had established his home in 19, I want to say 32, and actually planted trees. And he
Hmm.
was a big proponent of trees. And I had a love for trees from a very young age. I live here in Northern California. We have some monstrous trees. The
You
sequoias
do.
are the oldest trees. And my guest today has written a fascinating book on trees called Under the Sacred Canopy, Making Magic with the Mystical Trees of the World. And I had to have her on the program simply because I appreciate trees. We have ancient trees. We have one tree that's older than Christ. I think it's 2,800 years old. And there's some other ones that are close to 3,000 years old. And when you see the not only the height and the width of these trees, they are quite amazing. But today we are talking about sacred trees, the importance of trees down through the ages, how different cultures venerated trees, and also why they're very important for personal growth, not only from a potential magic point of view, but also for healing. Let me tell you about my guest today. Her name is J.D. Walker. She is an avid student of herbalism and gardening. She wrote a book just before this one called A Witch's Guide to Wildcrafting, Uncommon Magic with Common Plants. And this is another Llewellyn book. And she's an award-winning author, journalist, and magazine editor. And she writes about plants and trees. And I got this book from my assistant who said, Cliff, you got to look at this section in here on the Maya and the Aztecs and how they venerated trees. And I'm like, yeah, this is a very good book for Destiny. So, hey, JD, welcome to Destiny. Great to see you.
Thank you, Cliff. I appreciate the offer to come on.
We had to kind of clarify ahead of our talk here. You identify as a pagan. What is the interest in your background and why you would write a book like this? If you're a pagan, I think I mentioned this one before we started, that my idea of a pagan is somebody who cherishes Gaia, the earth, who works with Gaia, who recognizes the beauty, the healing, the natural elements of Gaia. But what was the desire to write this book? Because I mean, you're really drilling down pretty deep here and going around the world and lifting traditions from different cultures. But talk a little bit about the influence of trees on this book.
The I have always had, and I think I picked it up a lot from my grandmother, a sense of trees as something special. And this was before I was old enough to understand what paganism was, but it was a sense that trees have an energy, an essence, a presence of their own. And that's not to say that every tree that you walk up to is going to be Treebeard or some sort of little spirit in barky, leafy form. It's just that there is an energy there. And they're around for so much longer frequently than we are. They have a storehouse of knowledge and I think perception of how we should live in the world that we don't have, and willing to share that if you will reach out, if you will go into the woods, if you will connect with the wood, with the trees and things around you. And not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I don't often see people making that connection. They know trees are important. They know that they're pretty out in front of their house, but they really don't make that connection that trees have an essence or spirit of their own, and it's beneficial to connect with that spirit. So, in a large part, I just wanted to remind people how important trees have been to humans throughout life. And I'll have to apologize. Somebody decided that it was time
Your
since I was
helper,
talking.
your
Yes,
helper.
since I was talking, I must be talking to her. This is Pearl, and she'll be up here until she gets pissed off and she'll spit and off she'll go.
Pearl's your interview helper. For those of you listening,
Yes,
Pearl is
she's
a
my assistant.
is a cat that just jumped up on JD's lap to assist her in this interview. Give her some support. You write in your book that trees have and humans have had a special relationship for thousands of years. Talk a little bit about this. Is a great example. You get right into it. In Lebanon, there's 16 trees that make up an olive grove that are over 5,000 years old. Talk
thousand
about
years
that.
old.
I
And
can't believe they're still alive. They must have been planted in an area that has an underground water flow or something that keeps them alive this long.
that is something that is amazing to me too. And of course, in Christian traditions, this is the grove of olives from which the dove plucks the olive branch to take back to Noah when he sends out the bird to try to find out if it's safe to come off the boat or not. But the thing that is amazing to me is not only are these things supposed to be close to 5,000 years old, they're still producing. People still get olives off of these things and make
Wow.
olive oil and eat the fruit off of them. And that's just one of multiple examples, as you mentioned, with the sequoias, of trees that have been around for a long time in our storehouses of knowledge. In the tree community, in the art community, there is a great concern right now that we don't lose any of our older trees, because not only do you lose this wonderful stately thing that is on a property somewhere, you lose the biodiversity that it can provide. It's providing you DNA from 100 years ago,
Mm.
500 years ago, or in the case of these olives, several thousand years ago. And I think this is another way that people connect to trees to say life is enduring. Life can be endured. Think of what those trees have endured over thousands of years. And it gives us hope to endure and gives us strength to endure if, again, we will make that connection with them.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about another tree in Japan that is 2,000 years old. I didn't know Japan has trees that are that old, but I keep thinking they're all cut down through the various periods that Japan has gone through. But what is the name of this tree? And is it like one of those pines that are in the mountains? Do we
It's
know?
usually one of, if I'm not mistaken, and I have to look back in my book, it is one of the pines. And
That's what I
again,
thought.
these are planted at the kadamas are the ones are the tree spirits in the Japanese trees. Some of them are planted at temples and essentially are believed to embody the spirit of that particular temple. Uh, these older trees, the tree spirits, the kadamas in particular, are thought to inhabit the older, wiser, more mature trees. Now, I don't know if that means that they are the essence of the wisdom of that tree, or
Mhm.
if they're the beneficiary and the conduit that humans connect with to get to the wisdom of that tree. But the sense in that sounds so lovely in Japan is that they recognize these old, mature, living specimens are so important they have to be protected. These are our national monuments, living monuments, and something that we have to an extent in the United States. We call them heritage trees or witness trees. You have trees around, for instance, Manassas, around major battlefields that were witness to, unfortunately, the carnage and the strife that went on during the Civil War. And those are special trees because they, having experienced that, they embody it. And that's what gives you the somber feeling when you go through places like this, to understand that. There's another tree down in South Carolina, your readers or your listeners may be familiar with. I didn't mention it in the book, but it's called the angel tree. And modern people think that, well, it's called an angel tree because of an association with angels. That just happens to be the name of the family that owned the plantation this tree was on. And people have a sense of reverence when they go to it, not just because it's an old tree, but unfortunately, there's the sadness in the tree because it was the site of many hangings and disciplinary measures for some of the slaves in the area. So it's not just here's this thing that's been around for a long time. It was witness to some of the worst and some of the best parts of what we had growing up in America, becoming America. Excuse me a second. Beg your pardon. Got some cat hair or something, I guess.
Talk a little bit about witness trees. Are they necessarily trees that are in an existing area? You mentioned the Civil War. We should let our listeners know that you're in North Carolina, which is kind of the epicenter for many of the great battles of the Civil War, the American Civil War. Were they planted after the fact, or were they just trees that were there that were just
They were
huge?
there.
Okay,
No,
so
they were
talk
there.
about it. Talk about the witness trees.
Witness trees are trees that were there at the time.
Okay.
People are familiar in American history with Liberty oaks. Some of them are still standing. A lot of them, unfortunately, have passed away either through vandalism or storm damage or encroachment by other people. They are there and they are a tangible connection to a particular point in time, a particular history. And again, I think what happens in those situations is the tree becomes an embodiment of that, so that you get a certain feeling whenever you're around there. Unfortunately, a lot of our witness trees are identified with some of the harsher points in our history. There is one, a modern one, an elm tree at the site of the Oklahoma City bombing that took out the federal building. A beautiful old elm, which is interesting in and of itself because so many of the American elms have died due to a disease. They live up to about 20 some years and then they become infected and unfortunately die. And this one has survived. But not only that, this particular tree, which was a gathering site when you would be there at work, you'd come out of the building, go have your lunch under the tree. It was a pleasant place to be. When the bomb went off, when the devastation went off, it took out a lot of surrounding plant material and structures and whatnot. This tree survived. And this
Wow.
tree has come to embody that sense of survivors surviving, going on despite this terrible thing that happened. And it's now a focal point of veneration, both for the memory of those people who were lost to a totally senseless action and to the thought that we can do better, we can endure, we can go on. So there's a lot of focus on this tree. You can actually go on the website of, if you look up the Oklahoma City bombing, there is the museum associated with it. And it's my understanding that you can actually order tree seedlings and plant one of these that's an offspring of this particular tree.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
So that you can actually plant that in your yard. And again, it becomes that tangible connection. You go out there and you can lay your hands on that and feel that connection to that history. When you go to these battlefields again, you lay your hands on this and you feel that connection with history. It's more real to you.
So would you say that the people who have identified, I mean, because this is generational, this can go hundreds of years as a unique tree, which is a witness tree to a battle, to an event. Unfortunately, is there any positives that we can say a witness tree is associated with?
Well, here again, in the case of this elm tree, it does become that notion that in the harshest part of my life, in the deepest part of my despair, there is life. And there is a continuity, there is a going on.
So this is a healing tool.
Exactly. It's the sense that this thing has survived despite the presence of all of this negativity around it and sometimes the physical damage associated with it. It's just that sense that there is hope. And so many times that's what we do need whenever we are struggling to make connections in our life, struggling to understand what was the purpose of this thing that happened to me that seemed so bad. I can survive. I really can go on. I wear and have for about 20 years a jet bracelet. And a lot of people may know, some may not know, that jet is fossilized coal, it's a byproduct of a tree that over a period of time after it fell into a boggy area was turned into natural coal. But at one point it was a tree. Mm-hmm. And it's very significant to me. It gives me a sense of the continuity of life. Life goes on. And I wear it in the pagan community. Jet is usually worn for protection. But again, it's that connection, not just to 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. This is Andaluvian coal from 60 million years ago. So life goes on. And that's that spark that I turn to whenever I'm going to what's the bother? Why everything's going to hell in a handbag? It's just why even trouble yourself? Well,
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
goes on despite whatever happens around us.
I have this feeling, and I hear from what you're saying and what I read from you, that trees are sacred. And the longer they've been on the planet, the more energy they have. Talk a little bit about an ancient pagan belief that these trees have cosmological and spiritual truths in them. How does that, how do we relate to that thought?
I suppose that you say, how can they have that? How can something that has survived for so many years not have picked that up? I suppose that's one of the answers, that it would just have to be a natural occurrence. That again, having been witness to the passage of time over hundreds or thousands of years, that of course it would be natural for it to assume that. I know that in the Celtic cultures, tribes would tend to identify with a particular tree. So some of them would identify with elm trees, some would identify with yew trees, and some, of course, with oaks, because oaks were frequently considered a very important source in the community. Irmisil was probably a big oak tree at one time for a particular Saxon group of Celtic folks. But the idea was that this tree absorbed the history of the tribe, absorbed the history of the clan with the passing of each clan. And again, remembering back in our history, when a lifespan was probably 30, 40 years. I mean, you had people who lived older than that, but generally speaking, 30, 40 years. And you've got an oak tree that's going to be living for 500 years,
Yeah.
even say 300 years, and see how many generations came to maturity under that tree after celebration. And it was that connection, not just amongst the people that you were with right then and there as you host your seasonal celebration of the harvest, or the coming celebration for winter, or the celebration of the renewal of spring. You knew that your ancestors did the same thing, and there was that sense of community and continuity. That's why it was so important whenever tribes or clans would attack one another to go to the center of that community and cut down that tree, because at that point you cut the life of the tribe, you destroyed the tribe when you destroyed that significant tree that they held their rituals and their ceremonies and
I
things
never
of that
heard
sort.
that. That sounds, I mean, that's brutal to cut down an ancient
Oh yeah,
tree that's part of a community. That's like killing the lifeblood
exactly.
energetically.
And that's, to be quite honest, that's one of the reasons why you frequently have Christian stories from around, usually around, I would say 600 AD, particularly going up to about 1400 AD, when Christians would move into an area and they were trying to be honest, there was a lot of cajoling to bring people into their Christian community, but when they got right down to it and wanted to force conversion, one of the first things you did was go in there and cut their tree, their ancestral tree down to destroy it. And then, of course, on top of that, they built a ceremony. Excuse me, they built a church usually on top of it. That's why I think it was very interesting when we speak about some of the Lithuanian and Central European traditions. They were some of the last to be converted to Christianity. And in those cases, it was not unusual for the overwhelming Christian force that came in to convert the local population. By that time, and at this point we're talking about by the 14, 15, 1600s, rather than take that drastic measure of cutting that tree down, they would simply go to the tree and carve Christian symbols into it. So,
Uh,
okay, now this is a Christian source of your community spirit, so to speak. And they found that that was an easier way to bring people along. You didn't destroy their entire history, you assimilated it, and you
mm.
reinterpreted the legends to give them more of a Christian spin to them. But importantly, you carved those Christian symbols on the tree, and then you held certain ceremonies under the tree, and that made the religion more accepting, more acceptable to the pagans in those communities.
We're going to come back to some of these ancient traditions, especially in the Mesoamerican area, which you highlight beautifully in the book. But I want to talk about tree spirits and the energy behind that. You get into a whole section where you're talking about the apple tree man and the various Greek and Roman spirits that are within the trees. Talk about the apple tree man and why that's significant.
That's a continuation, I think, probably of a lot of the traditions that may have come out of the Mediterranean. It was not unusual for those people to see living spirits in the tree, such that when you cut the tree down, it actually bled. And frequently there was some curse attached to it. But when you get to the apple tree man, this is for people who are managing orchards. It is usually found in the oldest tree in the orchard. And again, we're usually talking about apples here as opposed to pears or quince or something else. But you appeased the apple tree man because he was the guardian spirit of your orchard. He was coordinating the activities in your orchard so that the orchard was healthy and it would be fruitful. And you would be especially nice to the apple tree man. You'd leave little gifts of food, certain libations and things around him, because not only would that keep him encouraged to make sure your orchard was a healthy place to be. But of course, because he'd been around for a long time, he knew where things were buried. Because, of course, what did you do back in the day before there were banks available? You buried your wealth. Well, he knew where the guy buried it who had the orchard before you
Oh, you're
did.
kidding me.
And if you were really nice to him, maybe he would tell you where the treasures were buried.
Go back to the inception of the apple tree man. How did someone will his physicality to a tree, the energy of a human being, or how does that work?
This is an interesting idea. In my approach, and when I looked at the book, I specifically started out talking about trees having a particular energy that is unique to them. They're not leafy people. Again, they are not graybeard. They are spiritual entities in and of themselves
Okay.
that you can feel. I think in time, that energy in some cases can evolve into a spirit. Now, that's my interpretation. That wouldn't be necessarily anyone else's. And certainly in the case of the apple tree man, you didn't go to the oldest tree and do some sort of spell or ritual, and poof, the energy in that tree suddenly becomes the old man. He evolves there and is attached to that tree. In the
So,
case of the
so are you saying like a sensitive from the group, say the local psychic or pagan or whatever, would come upon this tree and feel an energy and identify it as much, much more than one of
much
the
more
other
than
in the grove?
exactly.
This is the energy keeper. This is the spokesperson for the grove. Is that what you're suggesting?
Exactly. It takes someone who would be able to recognize it, or a sensitive would, in today's parlance, we would say a sensitive,
Yeah.
not a shaman, not a druid, not necessarily a religious leader, but a sensitive to go, there's more than just the energy of the forest and this particular tree. I have a beech tree on the property here, and there's a lot of beech trees on the property. They all have wonderful energy to them. This one feels to me like a special energy, and beech trees are usually considered in Celtic traditions to be female. And I say she because the beech tree is one of the oldest trees. They equal age frequently of oak trees in a natural forest. So they're one of the older trees, and we call her Queen of the Woods. The tradition is to call her Queen of the Woods or Mother Beech in that case. And in that case, there is a particular root formation under beech trees. And if any of your listeners are familiar with beech trees, you know that they send out these rolling roots that look like boa constrictors. Oak tree will generally have knobby roots that go down into the ground, come off the tree, they go down in the ground.
Right.
Beech trees can kind of contort their roots a little bit and really roll over one another. And in this particular tree, it has put together a mass of roots that has two roots going off this way and two roots coming down this way, so that you can lay on those, put your arms and legs over those roots, put your head literally in the lap of the beech tree, and do a meditation and feel perfectly safe with doing this. And it makes it easier. I talk in the book about how to do a spiritual journeying, or some people call it astral travel, by doing a meditation with the tree. And when you lay on this tree, you can just about feel yourself just sinking into it, becoming one with it.
I
You're
love that.
looking up at the canopy and you see the leaves rustling, or if it happens to be in the wintertime, you just see the branches going up, sinking into the sky, the way the roots sink down into the earth. And you can fall into a meditation that is just so wonderful and so relaxing if you will allow yourself to do that. Now, there are plenty of other beaches on the property, and they all have lovely energies. Some of them have nice root formations so that you could sit down on them, lean back, and have your lunch or read a book or whatever. They don't have the same energy as this particular beach does.
It's a
And
unique energy. Yeah.
yeah, that's where I think you go from being simply alive and vibrant to having a personality or a character that we can, as humans, we look at and say, oh, this is the old man apple, or this is Mother Beach, as the case may be.
Hmm. I love your example of laying down and meditating or kind of contemplating where you're at with a tree. What do you think is the complement between human physiology and tree physiology? Is there, we'll get into some specifics later, but I'm just curious, as we're at this point right now, what would you say makes us so compatible?
There is a universality to the structure of trees. We see the pattern of trees repeated over and over again. If you are aware of how the blood vessels go through the body, that's how they branch off of a tree. The blood vessels come out, there's arteries, and then they go off into their smaller and smaller veins. If you look at a delta, you can see either a root system, a river delta, you see a root system, or you see a treetop. You can look at the patterns of crystallization on a window or on a lake and see that veining pattern. It's repeated over and over and over again. I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to the idea, but I actually came across one author who suggested that the human lungs, again, you have that trunking system, you have a
Right.
main system that branches off. And this author was suggesting that that is a carryover somehow or other in far distant evolution from trees to humans or to mammals. That same pattern, which was it's just a perfect way of being, was just a natural to be repeated over and over and over again. Nature uses things that work. She discards or lets go extinct things that don't work. And this is something that works. And whether we realize it or not, and perhaps ancient people would have been closer to this because, of course, they would have been into animal slaughter and probably would have seen quite enough death and carnage in their own lives. They would have seen the branchings in the lungs and go, whoa. They would see, if they could get up high enough, the branching of the rivers and be able to say, here is a tangible representation of this system that we see over and over and over again, even in our own bodies.
Yeah, I love that analogy. We mentioned the apple tree man. Talk a little bit about the Native American grandmother cedar. I really love that one, and I can imagine a cedar being hundreds of years old. That various generations of Native people, I think the Iroquois. I don't know if that was the Iroquois or not, but they have these oral traditions of these ancient trees in the Americas. Talk about that.
That one was an interesting story of the creator god, the protector god, who goes and he creates all of these creatures, and he creates humans, which he calls his two-legged creatures, and they don't know very much. They're not very smart. So he goes to Grandmother Cedar and says, will you teach my two-legged creatures your wisdom? And she agrees to do that. So she teaches them how to use her bark and her leaves for medicine and for food. She teaches them how to take the inner bark and weave it into hundreds of things, from strapping to baskets to things to help to hold the housing together, taking the tree itself and making boats and one thing and another out of it, so that the tree becomes something that supplies all of life. So she shares that wisdom, and you say, well, why would she do that? Because if they're hacking on the tree, the tree's going to die. She does that because the great protector asked her to, but she does that to give of herself, and by giving of yourself, you ensure the longevity of the community. And I think that, as much as anything, is one of the things that in the Native American, that particular Native American culture. They were saying, this is how, as a community, we survive. We give of ourselves so that others can benefit. In the long run, we benefit too, but the whole community can survive.
Wow. This book
There's
has
some,
this book has so much in it. We can only scratch the surface of exactly what you have. I want to get into the tree of life, and this is a fascinating topic because it really gets into ancient cultures, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the early American people, Aztec, Maya. A lot of the mythology and storytelling is the tree of life, how humans came to be. And let's start with the Babylonians, who have the mighty trees, and how they relate to spawning the humanity.
Well, you have a number of different stories, and again, it gets a little confusing. And a lot of times, these myths begin to mesh because you start out with Sumerians, and then you go to the Akkadians and the Amorites, and then you get to the Babylonians. So a lot of these myths will overlap. For instance, there is the beginning of life in Eridu, where Eridu is one of the first cities. It's one of the five first cities in the world where the gods create human beings. And all life is supported by the Kishkenu tree with a top that has turquoise leaves and crystal branches and roots. And if you take of the leaves, it provides immortality. Now, in one of the myths, in Anu, who is a principal goddess of that particular region, her tree, the Kishkenu tree, becomes infested. It's infested with serpents and with, golly, all of a sudden her name got away from me. Lilith is a demon who infests the tree. So she needs to get this out of the tree. So she asks Marduk to get these demons and things out of the tree. And in this myth, he runs the demons off, but then he ends up cutting the tree down and he turns it into a throne for Inanna. There's another myth that says that here is this tree of life that provides for the structure of the world and the organization of the world. And then there is a battle between the gods who have become upset with humans. And in the course of that battle, the tree is destroyed. So once life has been established through one way or another, the tree gets destroyed. It's no longer there, but that's okay. Life is going on at that point. Interestingly enough, Eridu still exists. It's not called Eridu anymore, but it does still exist in that in that particular area as one of the oldest cities in the entire world. Whether or not you could go there and find some old Kishkenu trees, I don't think you'll be able to do that, but might be interesting to go try.
I find it just amazing that these myths involving trees are really fundamental or foundational for the story of man coming around. Of course, Adam and Eve pulling the apple from the apple tree, and that story, you bring up a little bit of that. But in Europe, you talk about how humans were formed by the logs of trees by Odin, and I'd never heard that story before. How humans were created by tree parts.
And this is one of the fun and the frustrating things about mythology. We don't know why, but he and his brother were walking along a beach, and I don't know if they challenged one another or if they just said, "Hey, let's see what we could create here." They have an old ash log. A log from an ash tree. They have a log from an elm tree. They turn the ash tree into a man. They turn the elm tree into a woman. And this is where people come from. They begin to procreate and they populate the world. Interestingly, you don't see a lot of myths in the Nordic traditions about elm after that point. It's mostly focused on the ash tree. And there are a couple of areas that say, no, it was never an ash tree, it was an oak tree. But in the Nordic tradition, most of us are familiar with the important tree is the ash tree. But again, why? Sometimes you get a reason. For instance, in the Mediterranean area, when we're talking about the Babylonians, more in El, and at that time created humans to serve them. They wanted someone to venerate them. And the first bunch of people that they create are noisy, they're loud, they're obnoxious, so they get destroyed. And then you have to have one or two people left over to repopulate the world again. And of course, in the Mesoamerican tradition, there are 5 iterations of the world where the gods start out. Again, they're trying to create someone who will venerate them.
Right.
So they go through several iterations of worlds trying to create a suitable subject to venerate them as and to worship them and to supply them with the energy that they need, the blood that they need over time. So it's not just one time, sometimes it takes several times to try to create the world. But the reason being, mostly to create someone who will venerate them. In many of the other myths, the gods are doing it. For instance, in the Celtic, it's very hard to nail down in the English Irish tradition a creation story. One of the ones that you see periodically is that where the ocean and the earth came together, these two forces procreated. And so you end up with the mother goddess who then procreates with the child. In this case, it's usually considered to be Cernunnos. And then from that, you get all of creation. And others, when you get those two forces coming together, you get an oak tree, and everything that evolves from that point on comes from the oak tree. People come from the acorns that fall from the oak tree, and other parts are used by the gods to create other creatures and other things in the universe. That one's a little bit more hard to nail down because, like the Nordic folks, nobody wrote this stuff down. It was word of mouth. So we hope we got it right.
I want to jump into the Americas now because you have a wonderful section on the Mesoamerican cultures, notably the Maya and the Aztec. Talk about the Maya maize god Hunyan Yi, how he separates the earth from the sky so that the two domains are separated and
Yeah,
allowing the humans to exist.
it's interesting because there's a correlation actually in Greek mythology. This is the time of the laying down sky, so that the sky and the earth are laying on top of one another, and they need to be separated before any creation can go on. And again, as you're familiar, this isn't the only creation myth. There are other creation myths in the Aztec world in particular. It's a matter of taking the monster that's in the middle of the lake in Mexico and ripping it apart and creating it kind of like Tiamat. But in this case, the maize god has this situation where these two energies are right on top of one another, and you can't create a world. So you separate them, and to hold them apart, you create the ceiba tree. And the ceiba tree is the cotton silk tree that provides so much material for the indigenous populations there and gets so large. It has these almost flying buttress type roots that support the trees.
Trees.
It's
Yeah.
just absolutely huge and massive. So you set this one tree in the middle to hold the two apart. The top of the tree, the canopy tree, becomes the Milky Way, points to the north, and then you set up four additional trees on each of the four quadrants, north, south, east, and west. Each of them have deities associated with them. The main tree then becomes the universe tree that the ruler identifies with. He is the embodiment of the universe tree and makes that living connection between them. But then you have the creation of the 13 different layers of heaven above, or heavens above, and I believe it's 8 below, the various levels of what we would consider the underworld or hell. And this gives structure to the universe.
Amazing. I want you to talk a little bit about, and this is fascinating. I'm going to be in Palenque in November with our annual tour. On the sarcophagus of Lord Pakal, King Pakal, is the tree of life.
Yes.
A lot of people have interpreted that as a spaceship, and he's pointing the way. Of course, that's Ancient Aliens, Eric Van Donigan. But actually, as I look at it more closely, it actually is a tree. And how do you interpret Pakal's? Is he ascending the tree into the afterlife?
It is my understanding that the ruler is the personification of the tree. He is that living conduit. He is the one who can speak to the gods in the upper levels. And if there were a need to be in the lower levels, of course, in the Mayan and Aztec and several of these Central American traditions, I don't know why anybody wanted to go there, but by the same token, I don't know why anybody would want to go to hell in Yggdrasil for that matter. But he is the personification of the tree of life and the androgynous deity, primary deity in these Central American traditions. He is that embodiment. He is your living conduit. That's why he is so important to lead rituals and to lead you into battle, because he is your connection to heaven. He is your connection to the afterlife. His vitality is the vitality of your community.
Yeah. Did you see a correlation between the kings of the Maya and the pharaohs of Egypt at all? I'm just trying to think, because I've been to Egypt quite a few times, and I'm thinking there are representations of the pharaohs ascending earth to the afterlife, but I don't think I remember a tree being involved, but I'm sure there must be symbology that you've discovered that relate to the pharaoh transitioning physical life into the spiritual life.
The pharaoh does transition, and if you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, that is your game plan for how to get through the afterworld, so that you can then ride with Ra on the sunboat going through the daily cycles. And if you needed to at any point come back to your place of rest where your body was mummified and your spirit could re-inhabit that. They did not, it's my understanding that, again, in the Central American traditions, the king is the embodiment. He does not become, he is not the god. He is the physical conduit. He's the, what we would call an avatar, I would guess, of the deities of the afterlife, or the main deity of the afterlife. He is the embodiment of the universe tree. In the Egyptian tradition, you have a tree of life, a concept of a tree of life, and it's usually the palm tree. And again, that's a phallic symbol. So, of course, that would be the symbol of life in a masculine community. And there are the sycamore trees, the turquoise sycamore trees that you pass through at some point on your journey, and nuts greet you there at the sycamore trees saying, you are welcome, partake of my milk, partake of the honey and everything that I can offer you. You are now one with the sycamore tree. And that was just another way of saying you are now immortal and you are allowed passage into the afterlife. But as far as the pharaoh was certainly the god's representative on earth, but not in the sense, at least in my reading of it, that in the Mayan and the Aztec traditions, the leader, the king of those particular traditions, was the literal embodiment of that energy, that primary deity. The pharaoh is the representative. Now he would become deified, like Ramses, for instance, or Imhotep becomes deified over time. But they are humans with a divine connection. They are avatars of of Ra or Amun, or depends on the period of time, Amun Ra, as the case may be. And it depends on the dynasty as to what emphasis they put on which deity. But there's a slight difference. I suppose it might be like splitting hairs when you get right down to it. But it seems to me that one is an avatar and one is a living embodiment.
The book's called Under the Sacred Canopy, Making Magic with the Mystical Trees of the World. My guest is J.D. Walker. J.D., you talk a great deal of using magic with these trees. Let's talk a little bit about applying personal will, personal energy towards it. Give us some examples of a tree and how it is used magically.
Well, one that comes to mind pretty readily is the willow tree. The willow tree, and it has an interesting interpretation depending on the nationality. In the Chinese tradition, it is a symbol of immortality and eternal life. And one of the reasons for that, if any of your folks who are listening are gardeners, you know that it's very easy to take a stem off of a willow tree, stick it in the wet ground, and get it to root. So it has this wonderful rejuvenating ability to clone itself, so to speak. With the Celts, it was not uncommon to take, when someone died, plant a willow tree at the grave, and the spirit of that ancestor would be assumed up into the willow tree.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, over time, associations in the European traditions, willow trees frequently have a sorrowful association, maybe because, you're planting trees on dead people's graves and hoping they migrate into the trees. So you could, it's not uncommon that they would make that association. But I like the idea, particularly in the pagan community, that the willow tree is a symbol of reflection. So she's important. Again, trees get male and female designations. The willow tree is female. She is important to poets. She's important to writers. She's important to creative people, to dreamers, for that matter. So to go and meditate under a willow tree is a good thing. I talked about, I can't remember if it was in this book or in my first book, you can do, if you need to do a little bit of work to get you some inspiration, taking willow leaves and combine them with mugwort to make an incense to burn while you are just relaxing and trying to get in touch with your inner muse so that you can be creative. Because again, she is very good for helping to inspire people. Beyond that, in the book, I mentioned that it's very appropriate at Beltane. Beltane is May. It's what most people would be familiar with as May Day, the 1st of May. And it's that period in the Celtic calendar where the veil is considered thin. So again, there's that association with death. You can more easily speak with the spirits at Beltane and at Samhain, Samhain being the association with Halloween. At those two times, the veil is thinnest, and that's the easiest time to be able to speak with spirits beyond the grave. But another thing at Beltane is the reinvigoration of life. So you have Beltane celebrations of fertility. You can braid willow branches because they're very pliable and create a garland, a head crown, and then you can stick flowers in it, and you've got a lovely little decoration that you can use to as you are going about your festivities. And there is a very practical thing as a gardener, kind of plays on that notion that we were saying earlier, the Chinese idea that willow trees are immortal and a connection to eternal life. If you take willow leaves, and this is an old gardening trick, take willow leaves, willow sticks, put them in a bucket, 5-gallon bucket, fill the bucket with water, let it set somewhere in the sunlight so that it kind of like cooks or stews or steeps. And then after that, you take the plant material out and use the water to water your new vegetable sets in the garden, or if you've transplanted a tree or a bush or something, planted new things in your landscape, or if you are starting new seeds, use that willow water to water those plants because it has a compound in it that's similar to, in effect, to the rutone that you use in the garden. So if you're a gardener, you're familiar with taking a powder called rutone and dipping a stem or something in it and then planting it, and that encourages root development. You can get the same effect with using this willow tea. And again, you can use that in ceremonial activities where you're encouraging new growth, where you're encouraging new development. We do something in the pagan community in some traditions where before someone comes into circle or comes into ritual, you asperge them, you sprinkle water on them. And frequently it is done with oils, essential oils that are appropriate to the season. Well, at Beltane or any of the growing seasons, if you wanted to use this willow water, again, to encourage that creativity, that new growth, that vigorousness, for lack of a better word, that's a good way to use the willow tree to help bring that magic into your life.
Talk a little bit as we conclude, JD, on how to use trees for healing. In other words, I'm talking about emotional healing. People go to, like I go and try to hike or walk in local nature a couple times a week just because it's rejuvenating. I feel a connection to earth and Gaia. But if somebody's having depression and sadness and they just can't get out of their funk and they go out and they're in an area with trees, what would you suggest to them to connect with Gaia, and how do we use trees?
Well, there is something out there that some of your folks may or may not have heard about called forest bathing. There's a Japanese term for it, but it became popular in the 90s as a concept that we brought over from Japan. And it wasn't that they invented this. Everybody, a lot of people understood that this was a thing. They just didn't have a term for it. So these days we call it forest bathing. Where
I love that name.
in this situation, ideally you would go to a park. In my case, I've got several little walking trails around the house here. Just to get into a wooded environment begins to lower your levels of stress. It just naturally will do it. Some people say it's because of the ion exchange. You have a lot of negative ions there, so that helps to kind of calm you down. Some people think it's the earthy smells that you just have to get. You may not be terribly aware of them. Usually we don't notice them until there's a low front coming in, and that woodsy, humusy smell that you get, that's because the odors are being held close to the ground, and that way you're more aware of them. They're always there, but regardless, when you go out into that wooded environment, you inhale those, and those smells begin to calm you down, begin to help you to feel more relaxed. When you go into these environments, it's wonderful if you can find a place where you're comfortable sitting down. Take a towel with you, take a blanket. If you have a place where you can set up a permanent place and put a bench or a chair out there in a wooded area close to your home, where you can sit down and literally take your shoes off and be in contact with the ground. I have a lot of folks that come to ritual who, regardless of the time of year, how hot or cold it is out there, whether the ground is wet or dry or whatever, they feel like they have to have their shoes off in order to make that connection. And again, there is some mundane scientific rationale for the exchange of ions and energy where your feet are touching the ground. And interestingly, from an herbology standpoint, if you want to get something into someone's system quickly, do a foot soak, because you have more receptors on the bottom of your feet than just about anywhere else, except perhaps the palms of your hand. So you can absorb that. And when you get into that environment, you don't, I think some people, when you say do a meditation, they immediately tense up and go, I don't know anything about meditation. So you don't have to. Sit down, sit on the ground, sit on a chair, and just breathe. Deep breaths in and out. Listen, what do you hear? Is the wind moving through the trees? Are the birds chirping? Do you hear insects? Is there water running nearby? Is there just something scampering over here? Mouse running through the leaves? You take your mind away from whatever it is that's stressing you, whether it's work or a relationship. You let your mind come away from that. There used to be and I can't remember now where I first came across it. Someone told me that the best way to solve a problem is to stop thinking about it. Push it down, take your mind off of it, let your subconscious work on it and present possible solutions to you. Yeah. Well, it's hard to do that if you're sitting there going, oh, golly, I've got this workload. I've got to get this thing done. And then there's this other deadline. How am I going to get it all done? Take your mind off of it. If nothing else, it gives you a brief spell where you can say, I can do this. It's not going to be pleasant to get through this particular knot of conflicting schedules and people yammering at me from both sides, but I can get through this if I can just have a few minutes to myself and relax. And when you do that, particularly when you do it on a regular basis, I think that you find that you begin to get an inner peace, and you can take that back to your work environment, your home environment with you to tap into as those things begin to crawl right back up on you and start demanding your attention again. Okay, I'm back under the tree. Everything's going to be okay. And you do that on a regular basis. And that's how you make that connection with Gaia, if you call her Gaia, or with nature, or with the divine, however you interpret it.
I love that remedy, JD, getting that. I mean, I always say get out in nature. Everything else will resolve itself. The big issue, though, is to leave your phone in your car. That's my problem. Is I take my damn iPhone with me because I'm always looking at it. You got to leave that alone because that just makes it a big mess. So
yeah, that's a source of a lot of our anxiety these days.
It's exactly. The book is Under the Sacred Canopy. My guest has been JD Walker. Give us your website, JD, and anything else that we can use to have people contact you or get a sense of where you're going to be speaking or how they can interact with you.
You can reach out to me at roadsidemagic.com, and that is magic with a K. Pagans spell magic, MAGICK.
Right.
.com. You can find me on Facebook at House of Akasha GSO. Generally speaking, that's the best way to get in touch with me, either one of those two ways. And the books are available, of course, through llewellyn.com.
Just came out in May, so this book's available. I saw it on Amazon, so people can.
Yes, Amazon is another good place to get it. Please leave me a review if you find that you liked either one of them.
Right.
I would really appreciate that.
Are you on YouTube? Are you talking on YouTube? Give videos at all?
Again, I'm a very bad techno pagan. And I am trying to get better at that. If I get to that point, it would be on Roadside Magic or at the House of Akasha, GSO.
Okay. JD Walker, a real pleasure. This is a fascinating book, and we could spend a whole day talking about the different aspects that you presented in it, but real fun read. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate the invitation to come on your podcast.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. No,
We all
very little
clear.
editing. You were great. You know
Thank
you know
you.
your topic. Yeah, I have the digital version. I'm gonna have Kat send me a hard copy so I can read more. Fantastic. This is going
Thank
up
you.
for tomorrow's program. I'm going to
Wonderful.
send you a email with the graphic that you can use as you please.
Yes, I can put that on my friends. I mentioned that I work with my friend. She has a nice following at Terra Blue GSO.
Oh, is that the storekeeper that you work with?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that's a good way to get in touch with the local pagan community in
Tell me again the
Central
name
North
of her
Carolina.
website.
It's Terra Blue GSO. She has
Tara, like
that's her
TERR.
TERRABLUE GSO. That's on
Oh,
Facebook. That's her Facebook page. Her website is myterrabluegso.com.
okay. Yeah, I'll look it up.
I'm very pleased. She's a smart little businesswoman. She survived COVID when, unfortunately, several of the other pagan shops in and around the area didn't seem to make it through very well.
How do you think she survived? People were still buying
She
trinkets.
adapted. She adapted. There was, Cliff, there was a surge at the beginning of COVID. She had done well to build her business up to that point. And then COVID hit, and a lot of places just shut down or tried to immediately go strictly online, which was eventually successful, but a lot of folks found that it wasn't initially successful. She literally pulled her shop out on the street. She had the benefit of having an overhang in the building that she owns. So she pulled the shop out on the streets with racks and with tabletops so that people who were stir crazy and had to get out were walking up and down the
Oh,
streets
smart.
there on
It was
Elm
an
Street.
outside store.
Exactly. And it was a bear there initially because, of course, she had to haul all that stuff back in at the end of the day. But she has gotten, I had a lady come by 2 Sundays ago, I think it was, when I was working, and we've got it down to a science now. We can haul this stuff back in about 15 minutes. So they walked down the streets and we said, "Oh, so sorry, we're closing. Do come back and see us at, 11 o'clock tomorrow. We'll be open tomorrow." Came back as we had finished up and were locking up, and they were like, "What did you do? Where did all the stuff go?" We have got this down to a science.
She
Haul
must
it
have
in,
had
haul it.
big display trades on wheels or something.
We've got a number of rolling tables, and
Yeah.
again, it gets down to a science. This goes in, and then that goes in, and this goes in, and
Well,
before you know it,
does she sell like crystals and trinkets like
she
that, like special rocks that have energy and all that?
she does a lot. She is known, I think, in the area as much for the variety of stones and things that she has, as much as anything else. She has a lot of jewelry, of course, because pagans love their jewelry.
I'm curious, real quickly though, JD, does she doesn't use terms like New Age store because that would turn everybody off.
Very few people around. I notice I use it all the time just because that's what
Yeah,
we
but I
call it.
mean, you know what I mean. You have to be
Yeah,
careful.
she says she's a metaphysical store. She says she's a
Metaphysical.
pagan's.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, is that
Um,
what she's listed in? Like, if you go to look her up,
Speaking metaphysical is the tag that you're going to find. It's
okay.
interesting. I think it's funny. We periodically have the children who come in with their parents not because their parents, some of them are pagan, some of them are not, but they come running across the street to go into the store going, "Come on, mommy, we're going to the witch store."
Oh God, that's the last thing you want to hear.
And
It's
you
almost like
understand.
they're stirring the pot, right?
But yeah, again, you go in and you see candles, you see stones. She has a huge herb collection. She has about a wall and a half of just about every kind of herb you can imagine.
Wow.
Her husband likes to tell people that her store is a metaphysical warehouse because it's not just for Wiccans. If you need things in the Santorian tradition, she's got them there. If you are into Nordic traditions, she's got stuff there. So there's a
Wonderful.
lot. There's a lot of different traditions, and they're trying to expand into the other half of that building that she owns. And it will be truly a huge store whenever she gets to the point where she can have both sides of this building open. And trust me, the stuff that she has in there, the stuff she would like to have in there, she can fill that up too.
So she's got a big space that she
She
could
has a large
expand
space. I
into.
want to say it's about, I think I have heard her say that the floor space for just half of the downstairs part is around 2,000, 2,500 feet,
Oh my
something of
God,
that
that's
sort.
huge. It's
And
huge.
of course, it's the same thing on the other. You know how they used to do these old buildings in downtowns? You took a large structure and then you built a wall down the middle of it,
Yeah.
and then you rented out both sides. And that was what she had when she started. She was on one side, and the man that owned the building was on the other side, and had antiques and old books store.
What
Uh,
downtown area are we talking about?
Greensboro, North Carolina.
Oh, Greensboro. Okay, I've driven through. I haven't stopped. So this is like on one of the main downtown arteries.
At the time that they opened up 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, because I was living in Greensboro at the time, I've been living in Greensboro since 79. When I first moved to Greensboro, you were specifically told, do not go past the railroad tracks. That is the bad part of town. Do not go past the railroad tracks. Over the last 10, 15 years, the city has done a wonderful job of renovating it, encouraging new business. So she's one of the legacy businesses down there now. And you've got all these other wonderful bars and restaurants and boutiques and things of that sort, all along the Elm Eugene. Actually, it's Elm Street there. A little bit further down, it becomes Elm Eugene. But they've
Wow.
done a great job of renovating it, putting in walking trails, making it very accommodating. There's more residential apartment living, condo living down there than when I first came here 30, 40 years ago.
Wow.
So again, she is a legacy business at this point in her business career. I think they opened up in, it was either 98 or 96. I
So
can't
her
remember.
building is probably a couple hundred years old, goes back
Oh yeah,
to the
it's on
late
the
or early eight, maybe even before the
late
1800s.
1800s. Yeah, they are on the local, I think they're on the local registry, not the federal national registry, but they are one of the local
Yeah.
registries of historic buildings.
How fun.
Uh,
How fun. Wonderful. Good to hear.
Next time you're through, stop in and see her. If
Like
you're
I
there
said, I
on
have
Thursday or
a
Sunday,
close
I would be.
girlfriend that moved to North Carolina, and your pricing, I'm in Northern California, our property values are out of control.
Oh
But she
golly,
actually
I don't
had a
see how you
house
can do it.
built. She had a house built and she loves it out there. She's retired and she's like, get yourself out here. You got a place to stay, got a place to visit. And I'm like,
There you
okay,
go.
I hear you.
And it's centrally located, so you can run off in all different directions. That's the wonderful thing about being in middle of North Carolina. It's 2 or 3 hours to the mountains, 2 or 3 hours to the beach, and still a lot of stuff to see in the middle of the state too as you're out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. JD, wonderful. Hey, best of luck on this book. I'll do my part and really well done, well researched,
You.
and I
That
like your
that makes
writing
me.
style.
I'll be honest with you. In writing both the Buddhist section and the Mesoamerican section, my greatest fear was in offending people who were more acquainted with it than even I became as I was researching it. Oh crap! I do not want to do or write something here that people are going to come back and go, "You idiot! What were you doing?"
Why would
So
they
I
have a
was.
problem with Mesoamerican
Well,
culture?
no, not that a problem with the topic. I just didn't want to offend anyone who was an adherent of, for instance, Buddhism or Hinduism, or again, more
No,
knowledgeable about the Central American things, to say, no, 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 you got it wrong. You got it entirely wrong. And that's why it took quite a bit of time
no,
and quite a bit of
you did well
research.
because you reference all your material in the chapters. So if they have a problem, they can look up that this person wrote this book and so forth and so on. So no, I don't see any problems whatsoever. My audience tends to be more worldly, and so you have people. You're probably going to have some good book sales. People
Oh,
want to know
wonderful.
about this.
There again, when I was pitching the book initially several years ago, why would anybody read this? Why wouldn't you want to know? For me, it's getting the information out there so that
Yeah,
people, even if, even in your own personal traditions, there might be some nuggets of information that you were not aware of. And
yeah.
certainly I found a lot of stuff that I was not aware of. So, that to me is that is the purpose of writing, to get
Yeah,
information out there so people can use it.
exactly. Exactly. I'm writing a book right now on
Oh,
the
cool.
Maya called the Maya controversy. And real briefly, there is racism in archaeology, and there's also huge bias against native or indigenous interpretations. And the real
Hmm.
sad thing about this is that we have over 100 years of racism as an interpretation for the Mayan and Mesoamerican cultures. And so we've lost thousands of stories and mythology and how things work in these
Hmm.
communities simply because these turn of the century, they're not even archaeologists. Antiquarians were the face of these people. And so we've gotten an ass backwards view of it. And
Hmm.
I've studied with elders, and they're like, we don't know where the hell this information came from. Well, it's one-sided is why. And so
Well, of course it is, and it's amazing to me that and again, I don't want to get into bashing the people, the Europeans who came here
yeah,
with their Christian beliefs and such, but just came in and wholesale destroyed collections of information that I can't even wrap my mind around that mindset. Why would you destroy this? Okay, you don't agree with it. I understand that. You're going to try to foist your beliefs onto these people, but you don't destroy it. You don't destroy knowledge. You just don't do that. But
well,
that's exactly what they did. And as I pointed out at one point in the book, I distinctly remember in the sixth grade having a teacher when we touched very briefly on the Mesoamerican history portion of the history class, saying that Mesoamericans did not have a writing system. They had no means of writing. And you see, you can see they had little pictures they carved on rocks, and that was all it was, little pictures. And even back in the 1950s, they knew that was not true, that
yeah,
there had been a system of writing. It was hieroglyphic, and it was not alphabetic. It
yeah,
was, again, using certain symbols for certain sounds. But these people weren't idiots. You don't build an empire and not have some means of
no,
recording and communicating.
yeah. And that's our real problem right now. And I have a lot of friends who are archaeologists. I have a lot of friends who are Mayanists who only work on Mayan ruins, and their education has blinded them. And I have to be very, very careful about communicating with them because they get upset if
Oh
I
my
say,
goodness.
you're looking at this from a very, central or singular focus. There's a lot of other depth to this information. So anyhow,
Well,
yeah.
good luck on your book and send
Thank
me a
you.
note when you get it. I'd love to read it,
Yeah,
add it to my collection.
yeah. We'll stay in touch, and we'll see. I'm only about a third of the way done. It's a tremendous amount of research,
I have
and
no doubt it is amazing. And again, people think there were two, well, maybe there were three civilizations. There were Incan, Mayan, Aztecs. That's all there were. And then you start getting into Toltec and all of these other,
tons of
it's just
subcultures. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
The whole thing that I'm fascinated by is that there's these pyramids, and at
Hmm.
their height, there were. My elder told me at some point there were 55,000 Mayan pyramids from Honduras to Mexico, and they were active. There's a whole
Hmm.
technology behind them that we
Hmm.
just recently discovered through NASA. They actually generate telluric energy. So
Oh my goodness, that's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And
I,
so
I just I just saw a story maybe a week ago, and I think they said they were doing some sort of laser scanning and found even more that they had no idea. They were in the middle of
oh,
these
that's
jungles and
Egypt.
this
That's
major.
the Great Pyramid. The
No,
two,
this was in Central America,
oh,
where they
okay.
had found by using this particular technology, they found all kinds of structures. I assume that some of them were not the stair step pyramids,
Yeah,
but just all kinds of structures. I had no idea that they were in there because they're
yeah.
so overgrown in the jungles.
I know. And the other thing that I am really loving is that I was told, this is like in the late 90s, by my teacher, my mentor, these Mayan elder named Humboldt's men, that the Maya are extremely old, not a
Hmm.
few thousand years, more
Hmm.
like close to 20,000 years, various
Hmm.
groups. And the archaeologists will not have that.
Oh yeah.
You can't even give them a sense of it, even though it's an oral tradition. If it's not scientifically provable, they dismiss it. And so by
That's
dismissing it, they throw out a whole history of oral traditions. So
That sounds like that argument that frequently comes up in Egypt. Is the Egyptian culture 5,000 years old or 10,000 years old? And they frequently cite the erosion on the Sphinx as
yeah,
an indication that the Egyptian civilization is much older than a lot of archaeologists want to admit that it is.
yeah. And this is the challenge we have today is our science is basically backwards. And this is what the language, not all of it, but when it comes to archaeology and history, we're only getting a fraction of the true nature of a people. So anyhow,
Mhm.
yeah, I have to go. Wonderful
Uh,
speaking with you.